Well, we're back, you and I, second time. I have Attia with me for a very special episode. And it's hilarious because this is our second recording because the first one,
Yeah.
well,
We
the
gotta tell
video
people.
got corrupted. And so here we are again.
Here we are. And we
Here
have
we
to
are
tell
again.
people, it's like we already did an episode.
Yes.
And now this is our second go at it.
This
and
is our second go at
there's
it. Are we
always
going to
a-
say something different? Is it going to be a whole new episode?
Let's see where this conversation goes. Part two.
Part two. Well, part one's never going to come out unless maybe it just comes out in like an audio format. But I feel like there is always a reason for things happening the way they do. And this is the first time a video file gets corrupted. And it is what it is. So I feel like let's make the most of it. Let's have the most fun conversation. And maybe let's be bolder because we're both manifestors. And manifestors are here to be bold in their expression and what we talk about. And so perhaps our last episode was not as bold.
Yeah. And that was one of the first things that we said, or one of your first questions, which was like, what's the nature of a manifestor? And I remember saying, and it's worth saying again, that the nature of a manifestor is to go first, to be bold, to initiate things, and to spark something in either the other, in an organization, in a family. So, you know, it's this continuation of like, where can we go and where can we spark things for people?
Exactly. I feel like, do you allow yourself to go first a lot of the times? Like, do you give yourself that permission to go first? And what does it mean to go first as a manifestor? In what ways?
Yeah. So as a manifestor, the essence of going first, right? So Ra Uru Hu, the founder of human design, he was also a manifestor himself. He spoke about nothing moving unless the manifestor moving. Unless the manifestor goes first, nothing really happens. And so for me, it really means, you know, it will sound counterintuitive, but for me, it means leaning into the energy of waiting until it's the right time to initiate. And only we really know when it's that time to like come out from, for me, it's the crab shell because I'm a Cancer. When is the right time to come out of that and to initiate and start something new? But I really have to lean into the energy of my cycles and my waiting actually before I can do.
Interesting, by the way. It's the first time I hear it said in that way because I don't necessarily feel like I look at my rest cycle as a period of wait, if that makes sense. I just look at it as part of the process of my creations coming to life. Like I find that actually in my periods of rest, there's a lot of intention in those moments of, okay, I did the work, everything's out there, I finished my creation, I acted on my urge, and now this period that comes after is just like the natural part of my cycle. So I don't know if I look at it as waiting necessarily.
I definitely go into a period of complete non-action when I'm outside of those like doing periods. Of course, I'm still like tending to myself. I'm doing the self-care things. I'm nurturing myself in the ways that I can, but I really have to be okay with sometimes just putting out not that much. We have to optimize though, because we both have businesses. So there is an element of like, you have to prepare, you have to be putting something out. So during my doing periods, I try and do as much as possible to account for those periods that I'm not doing anything. But yeah, I go into these periods of like action, wanting to be really out there, extrovert mode, that Leo energy. And then I will just go into these periods of wanting to be in the shell and not really doing anything. And over time, I've become comfortable with that. But yeah, for me to go first and start something, it's about timing, right? Like you have to be comfortable with like, okay, when is the right time to put something out? And when can I just not help but take action?
Right. It's true, by the way. And do you feel like, so I know before I actually go into that part, because I feel like the waiting part for you probably comes from the way that you make decisions, right? Because you are an emotional authority type. So with emotional authority, you do have to wait for the clarity to come to you versus like forcing the intuitive nudge of, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to do this. I'm going to start this. But perhaps for someone that's more of like a splenic manifestor or an ego manifestor, it might be done differently.
That's actually a great point. To be honest, it's something I'm trying to get better at. Sometimes when I talk about the nature of being a manifestor, I talk about the beast of my own manifestor type, but actually the manifestor is the type with so much variation from type to type. So the ego manifestor, which you are, is going to be so different to the emotional manifestor. And it's true that being an emotional manifestor, one of the main components of that is that we have to wait before making a decision. For an ego manifestor, you don't have to do that. It's just about letting your desires moment to moment carry you. For the splenic manifestor, it's really about those quick hits that almost feel like fight or flight, that if you don't make the decision, it really does feel like this life or death situation. It's not a dramatic way of describing it. And what are the other, I might be missing one of the manifestor types, but
There's ego, there's emotional, there's splenic. That's it.
yeah, I think that's it.
That's
yeah.
it.
So for those 3 different manifestors, there's different styles of stepping into action, actually. But I do still think that the nature of cycles is true. There is still going to be a doing period and then
A rest period.
a rest period.
Definitely. But it would be more in the sense of like acting on your urges as an emotional manifestor would be to wait until you are more steady in your emotions. Because if you're on a high and everything is great, then the ideas that are coming through, you're going to want to initiate all of them. Versus like if you're feeling very low, you're going to be like, I want to do anything. So it's like really coming to this point within yourself where you feel still enough to then be like, okay, I still want to go ahead and initiate this. And then you're going ahead and initiating it. Interestingly, as an ego manifestor, I find that my intuition really comes when I speak. So it's really, and not to say like manifestors, we are meant to be vocal, but it's like when I speak things out loud, do I really know what it is that I want to do? If there's ever a bit of like hesitation or like, yes, maybe and stuff, it's usually like not the right time. So I'll just give like a random example, but I've been sitting on getting another tattoo. I'm like, okay, I want to get another tattoo. Like it's something that's been on my mind for some time. But because I'm not going for it, I know that I'm not meant to do it. I'm like, okay, it's just not going to happen because if I really wanted it, I know that I would go and it would be like a no-brainer type of thing. But the fact that it's just kind of lingering.
Yeah. And so
like,
how are you moving through that decision?
I'm not doing it.
Oh.
Yeah.
And did you talk it out?
Yeah,
or
I
did
talked
you
it
wait?
out. I was like, yeah, I like it, but I don't know. I don't think I have like the right design yet. But I know like a really good tattoo artist. So I'm like saying it, but my voice isn't convinced about it. And then there's like, but if I put it there, then I think I'm going to block like certain meridians and channels that I shouldn't be blocking. And then there's like the toxins and, there's all of these different things that come up. So I'm like, okay, like, let's leave it.
Yeah. But as a manifestor, and I'll say there's 2 things to what you're saying. One is that that I want to kind of respond to. One is that often as manifestors, we define the effects that certain things have on our bodies, right? So if whatever your belief is around the tattoo, usually that's going to be the thing that happens.
Yeah, by the way, I feel like that's really true. And it's interesting you say that because we're both manifestors, like I said, and the video file got corrupted. And you then shared with me how you were like a little bit like uncertain about how the episode went.
Yeah.
And you were like, I don't know if I'm the one that manifested this.
We really have to be careful about the things that we speak or the things that we intend. And yeah, that was it. It's one of those things that I was not thinking only once. I'd been thinking about it a few times. Yeah, I was like, I was worried that there was something at the end of the episode that I said that maybe wasn't so authentic to what I meant. There was something that happened that day where I felt like, we get into our like our ego minds a little bit, and I was like, oh my god, the way I looked, like the hair was not hairing, like those kinds of things. I was like asking you in my mind, maybe we can get them to cut this part out. Well, unfortunately, the whole thing was cut.
The whole thing was gone.
Really, as a manifestor, this is an example of it, but there's many examples of where we have to be careful what we ask for, what we wish for, what we intend, because as manifestors, the thing that makes you a manifestor is there's a connection from a motor center, which is the doing center in human design, to the throat center, right? So it's either the heart that links there, the identity center, the emotional center, something. There's some kind of direct connection to the throat. And so that center for us is so, so powerful. So as manifestors, it's of utmost importance that we clear this, any stagnant energy around the throat chakra, any apologeticness, there's probably a more articulate way of saying that, but any kind of sense of being apologetic about what it is that we're vocalizing or bringing out into the world, it's much more essential for us to be clearing that channel than actually, I think it's important for everyone to do that, but because this is the manifestation center, it's the place where things come into reality from our inner selves. It's super important to clean that center so that we are bringing a cleaner intention out. But yeah, there's so many examples of where we can say things and they just will happen. Does that happen to you a lot too?
It does happen to me a lot, and I find that it happens very effortlessly. And what I did want to share as well, because someone DM'd me right after I posted our story together last time, and they were like, if I'm not a manifestor, can I still manifest? And I was like, of course you can. Like, everyone can manifest. And to be very honest, it's really funny, but I find the word manifest kind of a trigger word for me.
Wow, why?
Yeah, it's funny because I just find that I ask myself, who is the I that is manifesting, right? A lot of times, like you were talking about, it could be the ego that is manifesting this, right? It could be coming from this place within us that is not necessarily in alignment with the higher good of all beings involved. So when I say like I manifested this job or this person or this friendship or whatever it may be, right? I find that I have to humble myself a bit as well and be like, okay, who is that I? Because if it's who I think I am, then there are limitations to it. So even the word manifest for me, it's not something I use a lot. And I feel people sometimes with human design, they're always attracted to the manifestor because they're like, whoa, the manifestor can create all of these amazing things. And it's like to remember that all design types have the abilities to bring forth what they experience within them and what they visualize and what they desire and all of these different things. But I would also say, like you, to be careful what you wish for, to really tune into your internal world and ask yourself, more so than what you want to create in the manifested form, what do you want to experience within yourself? Like, what do you really want to feel at your deepest level? And for me as a manifestor, yes, I would say it's important to feel playful. Playfulness is something that I find is so unique to us. A lot of the manifestors I encounter, there is this playful, childlike energy to them. I see this energy therapist when I'm in Lebanon, and she always tells me it's like I'm entering a playground. She's like, I'm in a playground right now. She's like, it's so fun to be in your energy. And I feel like that's one of the traits I really appreciate about our energy type. I would say as well, it's this power that I do experience. Like sometimes I do feel that incredible amount of power. And what I love about the fact that we do have rest cycles is that it does remind me to be humble. Like, be humble. Like, you just birth something and now rest and relax and enjoy the fruits of your labor before you jump onto the next thing.
Yeah, for me, that's been one of the lessons and the blessings, I think, of this year, of realizing the power of humbleness and that there is, this higher power that's directing us. And sometimes I've met a lot of ego-driven manifestors. Like, one, bless his heart, I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, but once he said, sometimes I literally feel like I am God. And I can see how when you're a manifestor and when your words sometimes do come to fruition and things like this, that you can really believe that you're driving the whole bus. But I think it's also important to remember that there is karma, like there is something higher directing you. Sometimes you do get what you want, but it doesn't actually feel the way that you want it to. And I think a really important part of being a human is to give, actually. So, you mentioned one of the kind of things to focus on is what kind of experience does one want to have. And I would also add to that and say, like, what do you want your gift to be to this world? And yeah, coming back to the humble thing, it's so important. And I didn't actually see the value of it before. I really did think that the point was to, accumulate and to live life. Well, I was always a fan of giving in a way, of course, like kind of doing what we do, but I didn't see or understand like the power of service. And I think you do have to have a certain sense of humbleness to lean into that. So I'm super grateful for the lessons of this year that have led me to realizing that. And it's something you really have to experience, because many of us, we think that we're being humble, but we're actually not. But yeah, manifestors, it's important to start things, to initiate, but I would encourage people to bring other people also into those manifestations, because I do think that's what we're here for. I think that's why we incarnated, is to start something for others.
Definitely, like the founder of human design, being a manifestor himself, says a lot, right? Like there's this system that's been created based off of all the previous esoteric systems out there. And personally, I've come across a lot of the systems like astrology and quantum physics, like all of these different modalities that help you understand yourself more. And nothing's resonated with me more than human design, personally. Like, I love astrology. I feel like there's so many beautiful things in that system. However, like, look, you and I are both manifestors, but we have completely different sun signs, moon signs, and ascendants. And something that you mentioned last time that is also worth repeating now is like, no two manifestors will have the same experience. Like, we are all unique. And again, this is applicable to all the other beings out there. But it's interesting with manifestors, it's like we do have what we call like a closed aura, right? And an aura that is not as easily penetrable, if that's so.
Penetrated.
Like, people can't penetrate our energy as easily as we
Yeah.
can theirs. And I feel like that's something that, for me at least, perhaps why I experienced a lot of moments of loneliness in the past when I didn't understand that that's what was happening, because I could be with a lot of different people and still not feel like I was a part of the group.
This closed aura thing has been like one of the, I don't want to say like the banes of my design, but it's been one of the parts of my design, along with emotional authority and along with my profile, that I've had to kind of navigate my relationship with. Because the closed aura is so that you can basically, it's intended so that you can move things out of the way. Because if you have too much of an open aura, an open energy, you're more susceptible to the outside world, to other people's energies. Not to say that we aren't. We're still very kind of sensitive beings. I think all manifestors are and have to be. But when you have this closed aura, it moves things out of the way for you energetically, whether it's people or barriers. So that is where a lot of the manifestation rhetoric comes from. It's because we, with our closed aura, can move things out of the way and make things happen, actually, that a lot of people sometimes cannot. So it is amazing in that way. However, it does create this situation where sometimes we're not as readable to other signs. And manifestors are not immune to this when it comes to other manifestors, right? We experience each other just as anyone else would. But it's this aura that sometimes makes us a little bit unreadable, or we have to practice softening that aura. And how do we practice softening that aura? It's by informing, right? We have to sometimes tell people what we're going to do before we do it. We have to let people know that we're coming before we come, because it's hard for us to experience that ourselves. But it's true that sometimes it can be a little bit forceful when that aura pushes things out of the way and people don't see it coming. It's the only strategy, though. This is worth saying, and Ra says it himself. It's the only strategy that's pure PR. It doesn't actually mean anything to inform. Like, we could inform or not inform, but it doesn't stop the tornado coming.
It's so interesting, by the way. Like, when I found out that I needed to inform, I started informing people about everything. I remember there's this really simple example. Again, I had a friend of mine like send a yoga mat to my house because I really wanted a yoga mat. So she's like, okay, I'm going to send it tomorrow and like just have someone be open and like come get it from us. It's like, okay. And so I told my dad the night before, like, by the way, someone's going to come in the morning to drop a yoga mat. And he's like, why are you even telling me this? Like, you don't need to tell me this. It's fine. Let them come. Only for him to come to me the next morning and be all wrapped up in his head about like, why is there this person at the door with a yoga mat? And I'm like, but I told you yesterday. Like, I informed you. So a lot of times it's like I'm informing, but you're not even listening. So it makes me not want to inform because it's like you're kind of making it seem like, okay, this is such a simple thing. And then for me, it's like, I don't even need to tell you because you're not even going to pay attention. And then you're going to ask me anyway,
Yeah.
even though I took the time to explain myself.
Yeah, but there is still something, no matter what the reaction is, there's something energetic that happens when we
Yeah.
inform that sometimes we can't put words to, but it does change the energy a little bit. Maybe.
It does. It softens it, by the way. Like you said, it definitely softens it because had I not said anything,
It probably
then
would have been worse.
could have been worse because I told him and then he had that reaction. I was like, but I told you. You were informed. And he's like, oh, right. You
But there
know?
probably was still something that, like, because it's a typical manifestor thing. We don't inform, we get anger from the other person. Or we inform and it creates some anger in us when we get judgment based on their
Yes.
reaction.
Yes.
That's actually what's happening.
Yeah.
And then we're like, oh, I knew I shouldn't have informed, you know, and then
Exactly.
we don't inform. But we have to, as manifestors, I also have to remind myself of this. I don't inform for the other person's reaction. I inform so that my initiation is more seamless. It will happen either way, but it's part of our designs for things to happen in a bit more of a way that brings other people in too, so that we're not just bulldozing through this world. And that can often happen. But yeah, the manifestor strategy is the only one that it doesn't really matter if we do it or not. Like, it's better if we do it, but it doesn't actually change the outcome. Whereas for all of the other types, it does make a difference to the outcome. Their strategies of waiting for the invitation, for responding, for waiting a full lunar cycle, like if those things are not actually followed through, it does actually affect the outcome for the other, but not for the manifestor, because we're not a type that is generally dependent on the energy of another person. And, you know, because it's 9% of the population when you're a manifestor, that's sometimes a little bit shocking for people, you know, this notion of like feeling not needed. So informing helps people feel needed. This is a little bit edgy sometimes for me to say, right? Because I'm talking about myself, and you know, it's I have two sides of myself, right? One is the side that like loves to connect, and the Cancer side of me is super nurturing. And then I have a very manifestor side, which is very independent and actually loves spending time alone and is in my kind of initiating, like start things phase. And sometimes it feels like those two are in a bit of a tug of war sometimes. So when I lean into the energy of like that manifestor side, I'm like, oh no, but I also love people. You know, it's not such an easy duality to hold.
It is definitely a myth that manifestors want to just be on their own all the time. That's for sure not true. It's definitely an experience of mine that I can be more independent than a lot of other people. And I love to be on my own for sure. And I also love to be with people. But it's like finding that balance that works for me that might not resemble another person's balance. I would say for me, it's more like 60-40, 60 on my own, 40 with people, if I had to give like a percentage. But sometimes it could be 70-30, where I want to be on my own 70% of the time, especially when I'm birthing something. It's like I do like to be in my own space. But again, I feel like, yes, we can be very independent, but I would say one of our wounds would be around people then thinking that we don't need them or we don't need people.
Is it a wound or a truth?
Is it a wound or a truth? It's a conditioning, maybe. Could it be a conditioning?
I do think that manifestors don't generally need others.
Okay. So you could be single forever.
That's true. Yeah, good point. But that's one of the things that comes up for manifestors in relationships is that they do need to over-inform when in relationships because sometimes the other person can't read them.
Yes, that's happened to me for sure. This was said to me by perhaps one of my exes. He was like, it's so hard to read you. Like, I don't know what you're thinking. And even other people, like, they find it hard to approach me unless, like, I vocalize an interest in them in some way. It's like, wait, like,
Unless you go first.
unless I go first. And that I find a little bit tricky, honestly.
I love it.
Yeah?
I think some of my closest friends I've met online because I DM'd them and was
Okay,
like,
yes,
do you want
that's.
to hang out, you know?
I feel like for friendships, it's a bit different than when it comes to like a relationship.
Yeah, this is one of the top things that I see, actually, both with myself and with people that I read for is how do I go first when I'm a female and a manifestor? What does that mean? Is it about sending energetic cues? Is it about actually asking the person out? I don't think I've ever done that. You know, that's not
Same.
for me. And it's this thing where if you're in your feminine, how can you go first without feeling like you're the man that should go first, you know? I do think that. So for me, it is about more like kind of energetic cues. Sometimes it is about vocalizing something, but not really. Maybe I have a wound there too. But yeah, it's not the easiest thing to navigate. Like dating, well, that's a belief, right? But
It is a belief.
dating as a manifestor, you do have to play that duality of like going first versus wanting to stay in your feminine.
Someone did tell me, though, that dating apps for manifestors can be useful because it's like you get to pick and choose. And I was like, that does not sound like my thing at all. And
Yeah.
if you knew manifestors, maybe you wouldn't tell a manifestor what to do because we shouldn't be telling even each other what to be doing, right? Like, I would never tell you, oh, like, Attia, I think you should do this.
I do think though sometimes I can be initiated by a manifestor. Like
Yeah.
some of my biggest shifts
Okay.
have been caused by things that manifestors have said
Yeah.
to me, whether it's a
True.
cause of like friction in the moment or resistance in the moment. Like some of my biggest shifts have been as a result of things that manifestors have said to me or seen to me. So yes, but there's things that I know that are just not my thing, and so I can't go there. And when it comes to like beliefs around like dating apps, I really think whatever feels good to you, you have to follow that. But for me, I don't know, if dating apps don't feel that great, I can't go near them.
No, same. It's not my thing at all. I feel like I just wouldn't know how to even present myself in that space, you know?
Really, I think you'd be great. I think I can see the profile.
Oh, you can already see the profile. That's so funny. And yeah, no, just not the way I intend to go about that part of my life. But again, I feel like every person is different, and we're not speaking for all manifestors here, of course, but I'm sure it works for some people.
Yeah. But there is something in that some of the dating apps ask the woman to go first or to
Exactly.
match first. So if
Exactly.
that is something that people feel drawn to, I would say, you know, go for it. Like
Yeah.
if it's something, I don't think everyone gets the ick from dating apps. You know, just me. No. But yeah,
And me
it's
too. No, me too.
it's something where you have to, as a manifestor, follow what it is that your desire is, follow what it is that you want, and also to really clearly define before you go into something, what is the intention? And it's something I forget to do a lot as a manifestor, you know. So if it was something that I felt drawn to, I would make sure that before I downloaded that app, before I start matching, I'm getting clear on what it is that I want. Who do I want to meet? What's the kind of person that I'm looking to attract? Because magic can happen if you do that. But if you just go in and you don't know which way you're directing your manifestor bow and arrow, it's just going to feel, whether or not you get the ick from dating apps, it's not going to be fruitful for you. So manifestors, before they get into any situation, any dating situation, downloading any app, before they go and meet their friends, really need to be defining what kind of either effect or impact or intention they want to bring out of that situation. The toughest part sometimes about being a manifestor is knowing what you want.
I feel like that's the toughest thing for a lot of people in general.
Yeah.
Like, what do you want?
Yeah.
And it's gonna probably change throughout time, I feel, at least for me. But something I wanted to bring up again, because we spoke about it last time, and it's something that we both share in common, is, and that where we lead first probably, is that we have chosen not to drink alcohol. And so it's been for you, how many years again that you did?
Not years.
Not
It's been
years.
months.
It's been
5
months.
months.
5 months.
Yeah, 5 months of nothing.
Okay.
But I would say 2 years before that, I was maybe doing like 1 drink a month or, 2 drinks a month. There's been times where it's been more than that. But this, I would say like 2 or 3 years of really realizing that it wasn't for me and just being here and there about it. And then this year I had a kind of experience where I was like, no more, just nothing. And so I do think this is a lifelong decision. And it's been really interesting to see that, yeah, it is a place where I go first. It's a place where I think a lot of my friends are still drinking and it's totally fine. But I'm seeing little hints of inspiration as a result of this initiation that I've undertaken. And that's been really special to try and inspire people in some way, but it hasn't been easy.
It's not an easy thing because...
How long has it been for you, by the way?
So it has been a year.
Amazing.
But I would say that I have like taken like a few sips here and there, especially if it's like a tiny bit of a celebration. But honestly, overall, it's been literally 2 sips. So I feel like it doesn't even count because I never had a full glass of anything. And I never really was much of a drinker in the sense I never really enjoyed drinking. I'm not the type of person that wanted to like take a glass of wine with like dinner or like go out to a bar. It was never my idea of fun because very early on, I actually started to feel pretty exhausted from the drinking. It was like my hangovers were 2 days at 24 years old. So I feel like it's like, why am I going to put my body through that and my mind through that if like the effects of it are going to just not be worth it? It's like, okay, a few hours of fun where I get to like be myself and be whatever for people. But then it's like I get back home and I'm sick for 2 days. So that wasn't worth it. And I feel like I did get a lot of comments, not always like pleasant ones in the sense of, oh, you don't drink, so there's something wrong with you, like you're not fun, you don't know how to like loosen up or have a good time. Like there's all of these things that came up for me. And at first, perhaps I was a bit triggered. Now it's like I believe that it's me mirroring something to them that they are uncomfortable with within themselves, right? It's like I want to have to look within me to see why this is bothering me that you're choosing not to drink.
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it? That it really does bring out something in the other. And sometimes it doesn't. I've got friends that are super cool with it. They're like, oh, you're not drinking? Oh, totally fine. Oh, like, let's get the mocktail menu, that kind of thing, which is lovely. And sometimes it does cause a little pushback where the other person might take it as a trigger to defend their alcohol consumption. And it's really not about that. That's not my intention. But I mean, if it does that, it's fine. But for me, the reason that I stopped was not too dissimilar to you. It was also I was getting longer hangovers, like sometimes even like 5 days, I would feel the energy I'd feel something energetic, like not quite right. That was more towards the end, but mainly it was because it got in the way of the things that I love most about myself. The things that I value the most in what I do is my intuition. It's my upbeat vibe. It's my energy. And so I noticed that when I was drinking, it was not usually happening during, it was the aftermath. I would feel not so in touch with my ability to make decisions. And I was on this solo trip 5 months ago. And I went out and I only had only, now, like it feels like not that much, but I had 3 drinks, and usually like I would have an effect from one. And so that night I really felt it. And I had to make a decision in the next day of like which city to go to next as part of my trip. And I just could not make a decision, that I was getting these effects of like feeling anxiety, depression, like way more than I had ever had before. And I remember just the difference between that state and me, what I knew to be me, was just too great. And something shifted where I knew, like, I just don't think I can do it ever again, because even on a micro level, like, that's happening. And we think about the energetic effects of alcohol, like it does open you up to not such great energies, and who knows what else. Like sometimes we don't know what's happening in the energetic realm. I think we really have to be careful with strengthening both our sort of physical body and our energetic body. So that's one of the kind of pillars of why I do this, or why I'm sort of committed now to sobriety. It's funny to call yourself sober, right? It's such a strong word, but it's true. It's having this energetic strength and this commitment to having a kind of clean and clear relationship to yourself.
For sure. I feel like there's a lot of beauty in keeping that vessel clear, like your channel clear. You mentioned intuition. I find that substances do sway you from your intuition. Like it's like when you are overly drinking or smoking or doing all of these different things, yes, in the moment, it could be like this way of releasing things, right? Of allowing yourself to be seen more for who you are. I feel like that's why sometimes people drink. It's like I get to forget a lot of the things and I get to feel lighter. I feel like I can have more fun, engage with people, interact with them, be more social. And you like that version of you. And I find that for me, what took place is that I had to become really comfortable with myself in order to put myself in all of these places where people are drinking, where people are doing all different types of things, and not be pulled off my center and not feel the anxieties that they feel, and be like, okay, like if I'm feeling this way, it's because I'm reflecting it from my environment, perhaps, right? And
Yeah.
the intuitive part, for sure. I feel like substances like alcohol just don't work well with how intuitive you're going to be and how intuitive you can be. And if we're going to go down the rabbit hole, I feel like a lot of these things are put in place in our world for us to kind of, be preoccupied by the drama and the gossip and the small little things that ultimately don't matter. And it kind of numbs you to a lot of things that we should not be numb to. And I feel like substances in general can numb you from really feeling what you are meant to be feeling, including the boredom, because I feel like sometimes that's what can happen, is like you want a bit of that entertainment, you want a bit of that spontaneity, you want that bit of fun. And it's like, well, how can you create that in the mundane without those things spiking you up all the time?
Yeah, it's a really easy way. Alcohol, I think, is a really easy way to keep people asleep
Mm-hmm.
and not question things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something it's definitely worth saying, that we are not like exempt to feeling those things, like to feeling the boredom or sometimes the anxiety or the social anxiety sometimes, right? That would in the past push me to distract myself by having a drink and that kind of thing. But I still feel those things. I just feel like I've had to work on developing healthier coping mechanisms to that same situation that past me 2-3 years ago me might have wanted to numb myself with alcohol. But I still feel that thing. I just either just go deeper into it, and I understand there's a reason for it, and that sometimes alcohol pushes that reason away. And it might not be alcohol for people. It might be smoking, or it might be the drugs, those kinds of things. Like coping mechanisms can go really, really deep. But yeah, I think it's really about developing those healthier coping mechanisms to those things that are just a part of society. And I think they're only going to get worse, because we're only seeing more distractions coming at us. And we really do have to develop more of a spiritual strength to deal with those things.
You reminded me of a question that I asked you. I was like, because you mentioned spiritual strength, and I was like, what does it mean to have spiritual strength? Because yes, I would say that when it comes to setting boundaries for yourself and honoring your energy and how you operate and wanting your vehicle, your vessel to be operating at its optimum, right? Like you want to have the clear mind, you want to have that emotional intelligence, you want to feel that strong connection with the divine. And so, yes, you do have to say no to certain things and to certain people and to certain ways of being, to certain foods as well sometimes, right? Like we change these things around. So these are things I feel like that build up the spiritual strength. Like I'm a lot more anchored in my faith than I was before. And I'm sure it's going to grow. But it was to ask you as well, like, what do you feel like allows you to feel strong in your spirituality?
You do have to develop a certain confidence. And that comes by getting it wrong and putting yourself in situations where sometimes your spiritual strength is going to be tested. And it's through those experiences, I think by micro improvements, that you develop that strength. You develop your spiritual strength by saying no. You have to learn how to say no to things. Sometimes learning how to say no to yourself as a manifestor, sometimes that's tough even, for me to tell myself what to do, even is not so easy. But that's how I build spiritual strength, is by strengthening my discipline a little bit to the commitments that I make, whether those are bigger commitments or micro commitments. And also by being really true to your inner compass. We all have an inner compass that's guiding us, and it's an inner compass, and it can also be God if you relate to that, or whatever sort of spiritual higher powers you might believe in, your angels, your guides. I think tuning into those inner compasses and knowing that you're being guided beyond just the worldly things that, we're being pushed into. And so, I've experienced this a lot, that we can really, I think that a better way to say that is when we tune into that, I don't think we can take a wrong turn.
Definitely, it's important to silence also the noise all around you, regardless of the way that you're designed to make your decisions, because you want to find that inner compass within yourself, and all of us have that. Now, I would say something because I had like a very interesting conversation with someone recently. And so to answer it from this newer perspective or newer lens, it would be like, for me, spiritual strength would be to also not compare my spiritual journey with anybody else's spiritual journey, to also not undermine the experiences that I've been through as my reaffirmation of my connection to the divine. I don't need anyone to validate it for me in the ways that I did before. And when I was having this conversation with this new friend of mine, it was so interesting because, she was asking me things about like, what do I think about light language? And I was like, listen, I'm sure it's true. I'm sure people are able to channel light language. Like over the years, I feel like I've been doing it through my fingers. Like I get to move my fingers in a specific way. And I feel like that allows me to connect to my light language. And I know that some people are able to transmit it through words and through sound and through frequency. And then I told her, I was like, it's great to be able to channel whoever, the Arcturians, the Pleiadians, the wherever. But are you also speaking human? Like for me, that was another thing. It's like, are you speaking the human language? Because you can channel all you want from other planets, but you've chosen to reincarnate in this world as this body. And what good does it do if you're going to start speaking another language and nobody gets it?
That's hilarious, but it's so true. Yeah,
Right?
like before we ascend, sometimes we have to deal with the human things that we are. Are you
Exactly.
good with people?
Are you good with people? Are you recognizing the suffering of our planet right now? Because there is a lot of suffering. And if we keep being like, I just want to ascend and live on cloud nine and pretend that none of this is happening, are you really serving your purpose fully? Because I don't feel like that's why you came into this world. Otherwise, you would have just gone and reincarnated on planet XYZ.
That's a mic drop moment. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Now I'm bringing this up, it's because sometimes you might feel like as you're on your spiritual journey, that because you're not doing these things, or you're not having these outer body experiences, or you're not having these ceremonies, or you're not, this person with, not to undermine it again or to judge it, but, dressing a certain way, that makes you less of a spiritual person, right? I feel like sometimes that's where I also had to really tune out all of that. I hosted a circle the other night as well. And I do ask myself, I'm like, okay, like I didn't study a lot of the things that maybe some teachers have. Perhaps my offering isn't as great as some of the teachers that are able to chant certain mantras or have certain gifts and talents that I don't. And it's like, is it enough? And that's where I feel like the answer has to be yes, it is enough. Like what you offer is enough. Like within you, you contain it all, and we all do. And so to really rely on that and to remember that you are strong, you've carried yourself up until this very moment. So that in itself should give you the strength and the power.
Yeah, we all have a different energetic impact, or a different way that we're here to bring the magic from the immaterial into the material. And it's super important to tune out the noise when you're looking for spiritual strength, to follow your intuition, and to not try and explore so many things. There's so many things that you could explore on the spiritual path. And I do think that we have there are things that are made for us and that we're going to be guided to. So I would encourage people to find or follow what those things are for them. And Instagram spirituality is the thing, right, that a lot of people can get sucked into. And I think maybe for a period of time I also did, thinking that there's one way to do spirituality, but there really isn't. And so tuning out the kind of Instagram noise as much as possible, and again, following your sort of inner compass.
Definitely. And you're going to have to sometimes change your mind on things. And to have that open mind, I feel like that's the first thing with everything that we've shared, like to keep an open mind, to really allow yourself to have certain beliefs questioned and revisited and reprocessed in a different way. Like I'm always doing that. I feel like since our last conversation, new things have come up to the surface. For you as well, you turned a year older since our last conversation too.
Yeah.
So there is this humility to be cultivated as we come across new information on a day-to-day basis, and to also have that information filtered through us and be like, does this feel right? Does this not feel right? Where do I feel called to going? Where do I feel like I no longer belong there? Who makes me feel good? Who doesn't? Where do I feel expanded? Where do I not? So
And the humbling ourselves comes into play here too, because I really feel like we know nothing sometimes, or I know nothing. There is an element where there's so much knowledge that one can obtain on the spiritual path, and even when it comes to astrology and human design, but there's so much that is still to be discovered, and so many beliefs that I've had, even in the last year, that now I have shifted. So there is a kind of humility there of knowing that things can shift. And it's a beautiful thing to still have a lot to explore.
for sure, we all do, by the way. I feel like we all have things to explore and our paths to keep walking, and we all have our unique paths, whether you're a generator, manifesting generator, projector, manifestor, reflector.
Yeah, the number one thing, sorry to interrupt, but the
That's
number
okay.
one thing about human design that is kind of underrated or under talked about is the deconditioning element. And that's kind of what you were talking about, is that there's so much in spirituality about ascending and spiritual heights, and let me talk to the Lemurians and the Pleiadians and all of these starseed vibes. But I do think the reason I was so drawn to human design is because of the nature of deconditioning. How do we clear our stuff to actually become better humans and relate to each other better. And yeah, to manifest and create what we want in harmony of where the earth should be going, hopefully, right? With actually the ascension of the planet that we were born into rather than of other planets. So deconditioning, I would say, is one of the number one things of I think number one focuses of spirituality. And actually one of the number one focuses of human design is how to clear your stuff.
For sure. It definitely is. It's my favorite part about human design is actually understanding the areas where I've been conditioned and releasing that. And I'm so grateful, by the way, that we got to redo this. I feel like we touched upon new things and new layers that maybe we didn't discuss last time. So thank you so much for being up for this again.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you
having me.
being
And
here.
I hope we gave people a stronger sense of what it is to be a manifestor and also to build that spiritual strength. So thank you for having me again.
Thank you. Thank you so much.